begin with, we're going to think about what kinds of norms are relevant to belief. So one of the things that we've already talked about a little bit is the idea of epistemic norms. These are kind of effectively rules that govern how we should conduct ourselves as epistemic agents. So when we say that, you shouldn't believe that in an epistemic sense, we'd be using the should of rationality. So this is the idea that we might be saying that, on the assumption that you shouldn't be irrational, we're saying that, you shouldn't do that because it's breaking this kind of epistemic rule. But we might not be blaming you in a kind of moral sense. So normally when we say we shouldn't do something, we're saying it in a kind of moral sense. So we're saying, you shouldn't hurt innocent people is a kind of moral should. Whereas if I say, you shouldn't believe in contradictions, that's something that's definitely epistemic, but I don't really see you as a kind of morally worse person. I just see you as doing something that's kind of violating an epistemic principle that you ought to hold. So here's the kind of should of rationality then. But in his argument, Clifford goes further and says that we actually have, moral obligations, so the moral should that govern our beliefs as well. But in Clifford's argument, it seems like these moral shoulds are grounded in the epistemic shoulds. So here's one way of reconstructing Clifford's argument for why we have moral obligations as well as just epistemic obligations. So we might say, premise one, we have an epistemic obligation to possess sufficient evidence for all our beliefs. So this is something that, Clifford gives as his principle. Premise two, we have a moral obligation to uphold our epistemic obligations. And then finally, therefore, we have a moral obligation to possess sufficient evidence for all our beliefs. So this P2 is going to be something that is trying to link moral obligations to epistemic obligations. So we might not think that this P2 maybe applies in all senses, because it seems like if I say, that example I gave before about, you shouldn't believe in a contradiction, it seems pretty implausible to, or at least unintuitive, that this is going to be something that, is morally wrong. It might just be incorrect. And so we might not want to hold this exact version of P2, but we might hold a similar version. But the question we're going to be considering today is whether there are any kind of independent moral norms that apply to beliefs. So cases where we want to say that, look, I'm going to hold you responsible for your beliefs. It's something that you shouldn't do, but it's not the should of rationality that's really involved here. It's the moral should. So one of the things that's kind of interesting here is this kind of background assumptions that we have in philosophy. So typically, and this is like, I say typically because I believe it applies to most philosophers, but this is not to say that it's something that everybody believes, but it seems like a kind of default position that we're going to assume to start with. And this is the idea that we can be morally responsible for our actions, but not our beliefs. And so we might want to say, why is this? Why is this the case? So it seems like a background assumption is that, we can't be morally responsible for our beliefs, but we can for our actions, because actions have consequences and they can harm people, whereas beliefs can't. So it makes sense to hold people morally responsible for their actions, because these are things that can kind of have morally relevant consequences.